The wind outside howled like a wild beast. Snow whipped against the thin walls of Daniel's small tent. The frozen planet was not friendly to anyone who dared to cross it. And tonight was colder than anything he had ever felt. Daniel sat near, his portable heater rubbing his hands together, his breath turning into white clouds. He had been traveling alone for weeks. Mapping this part of the planet for the exploration agency, the silence of the wilderness was something he had gotten used to, but tonight it felt heavier, like the cold carried something with it. He zipped his jacket tighter and tried to relax. Listening to the hiss of the heater outside, the storm grew worse, making the tent fabric shiver with every strong gust. Daniel pulled his blanket closer, thinking he would try to get some sleep, but just as his eyes began to close, he heard something, a soft sound, almost like a knock. He froze, thinking it might be the wind. Then it came again, a faint, uncertain tap at the flap of his tent. Daniel's heart beat faster. No one should be out here, not at this time of night. He grabbed his flashlight and slowly unzipped the tent door. The beam of light cut through the snow. And that's when he saw her. A young alien girl stood there, shivering so badly she could barely keep her balance. Her clothes were little more than torn cloth wrapped around her body. Soaked with melting snow, her skin was a pale shade of silver blue, and her large eyes glistened in the light. Snow clung to her hair, which was long, tangled, and almost glowing under the flashlight. She looked at him with a mixture of fear and hope. "Please, warm me," she whispered in broken human language, her voice trembling. Daniel hesitated. He had seen members of her species before in passing traders and workers in the settlements, but never out here, alone in the middle of a storm. His instincts told him to be careful. He didn't know if she was dangerous, if she was running from something, or if she was even telling the truth. But the way she shook, the way her lips turned pale, told him she wouldn't last long out there. "Come inside," he said finally, pulling the flap open wider. She stepped in quickly, almost falling. Daniel zipped the tent shut again, trying to keep the heat inside. The girl sat near the heater, holding her hands close to the small orange glow. Steam rose from her wet clothes, and her breathing slowly steadied. He offered her a blanket, but she stared at it like she didn't understand. Instead, she moved closer to him, far closer than Daniel was comfortable with. "You're freezing," he said, trying to wrap the blanket around her shoulders. But she pushed it away and leaned against him, pressing her cold skin to his. Daniel stiffened in surprise. "What are you doing?" he asked. Her voice was soft but sure. "Need touch for heat." Daniel realized then maybe her species shared warmth differently. Maybe they didn't use clothes or blankets the same way humans did. Still, it felt strange. He tried to keep some space between them. But every time he moved away, she leaned closer. Then he noticed something else. Faint markings on her skin, lines and swirls began to glow softly. They pulsed with light every time she touched him. It wasn't just heat exchange, something else was happening. He opened his mouth to ask her about it. But she looked up at him with those huge silver blue eyes and said, "I choose you. Now you are mine." Daniel blinked, not sure he had heard her correctly. "What?" he asked, but she only smiled faintly, her head resting against his shoulder. The glowing marks brightened, casting a strange light inside the small tent. Outside, the storm roared even louder, but inside, Daniel felt an odd warmth, one that came from more than just the heater. A shiver ran down his spine, and not from the cold. He didn't know what this alien girl truly wanted. He had thought she only needed shelter from the storm, but now, as the glow from her skin wrapped them both in light, he realized he might have let something into his tent that could change his life forever. Daniel sat still, unsure if he should move or speak. The alien girl's head rested lightly against his shoulder, her skin still icy but slowly warming. The strange, glowing lines on her body pulsed softly, like they had their own heartbeat. He tried to tell himself it was just part of her biology. But the way she had said, "Now you are mine," kept echoing in his head. She shifted, pulling the wet cloth from her shoulders and dropping it to the ground. Daniel's eyes widened. "Hey, wait, you don't have to," he started, quickly grabbing the blanket and trying to wrap it around her, but she shook her head firmly. Her words, slow and broken, "Cloth. Stop heat. Skin." Better. Daniel realized she wasn't trying to be bold in her mind. This was practical, even necessary, still. The closeness made him tense. He placed the blanket over her anyway, but she let it slide down, pressing herself even closer. Her cold fingers gripped his jacket. And she looked at him like he was doing something wrong by keeping layers between them. Daniel tried to explain, "Humans. We wear clothes for warmth, for comfort," she tilted her head, confused. "Comfort? No. Warmth is from body." He wasn't sure how to argue with that logic, especially when she was shivering less and her glowing marks were getting brighter. The heater hummed beside them, filling the tent with a gentle warmth, but Daniel noticed something strange. The glow from her skin seemed to spread into the air, like a faint mist. When he breathed it in, he felt lighter, calmer, almost like his own body temperature was rising. Was this why she had come to him? Was she using him to activate something in herself? She leaned back slightly, her eyes meeting his. Her voice was quiet but carried weight. "You? Human? Alone?" Daniel hesitated. "Yes, I'm alone." Her eyes softened. "Then we same." She whispered. He wanted to ask what she meant, but she moved suddenly, taking his hands and pressing them to the glowing marks on her arms. A wave of heat surged through him, sharp and fast. Like stepping into a hot spring, he pulled his hands back instinctively, but she caught them again. "No. Keep. Or bond breaks." Bond, the word stuck in his mind. He had heard about certain alien cultures that had life bonds, partnerships formed in extreme conditions, but those were usually between members of the same species. Why would she'll try this with a human? Daniel tried to pull away gently. "Look, I think you just need to rest. We can talk about this in the morning." Her grip tightened, her eyes intense. "No." Night is the only time. Something in her tone made him pause. This wasn't just about staying warm. This was something sacred to her. Maybe even dangerous to refuse. The storm outside rattled the tent, and for a moment, Daniel thought he saw movement through the fabric, dark shapes against the snow. He turned his head quickly, but when he looked again, there was nothing. Still. The unease stayed with him. He glanced back at her, but she was watching him closely, almost reading his thoughts. "You think? Danger?" "Yes." She asked softly. He nodded slowly. "Maybe." She leaned closer, her breath warm now. "Not maybe. Danger is here." Before he could respond, she reached for his jacket zipper. He caught her hands. "What are you doing?" Her voice was, "They will smell fear. Smell cold. Only way to hide is bond." Daniel swallowed hard. This was going far beyond his understanding. Was she protecting him, or trapping him into something he couldn't undo? She let go of his jacket, but didn't move away. Her eyes searched his face for a long moment before she spoke again. "When storm ends, if bond not complete, I go. You die." Daniel froze. Her words weren't a threat. They sounded like a simple fact. But he didn't know if she meant the cold would kill him, or her people would, or something worse. The wind outside grew louder, almost drowning out the sound of their breathing. The glowing lines on her skin brightened, painting the tent walls with soft light. Daniel realized she was looking toward the tent door now, her expression tightening. "They come." She whispered, "Who?" Daniel asked. She didn't answer. Instead, she reached for his hands again, holding them tightly as if she was afraid he'd vanish. Her voice was urgent now. If they see you, not mine. They take me. Okay. And you freeze alone. Daniel didn't know what to do. Part of him wanted to believe she was just frightened and confused. Another part feared that whatever was outside really was a threat, and that her strange ritual might be the only thing keeping them both alive. The tent fabric shifted slightly, as if something brushed against it from the outside. Daniel's pulse quickened. She leaned closer, her lips near his ear. Choose now, or it's too late. The wind screamed outside like a living thing. Snow pounded against the tent walls, each gust making the thin fabric bend inward. Daniel could feel the cold trying to crawl its way in through every tiny gap. The alien girl stayed close to him, her hands gripping his as if letting go would mean the end. Her glowing marks painted his skin with pale light, and he noticed they were getting brighter with every passing minute. He kept glancing toward the tent flap. Something was out there. He could feel it, not just the storm, a presence. Moving in the blizzard, the girl seemed to sense it too, her breathing slow but tense. They wait, she whispered. They want me weak. Daniel frowned. Who are they? She looked at him for a long moment, as if deciding whether to tell him the truth. Then she said, my people. Hunters. Sent to take me back. The word hunters made his stomach tighten. Why would your own people hunt you? He asked. Her gaze didn't waver. Because I refused. The elder Daniel didn't understand everything, but from her tone, he guessed the elder was someone powerful. Refused him for what? He asked. She tilted her head. Bond. Marriage? Life? Daniel's eyes widened. So you ran away? She nodded once. Her voice quiet. I ran to you. The tent shook violently as another strong gust hit. Daniel's instincts told him they didn't have much time. The storm wasn't letting up. And if these hunters were really out there, they might not wait forever. He checked his gear, a small blaster, a half-empty power cell, and emergency rations, if it came to a fight. He wasn't sure he could protect both of them, the girls. Grip tightened again. You can't fight them. Only bond can keep you safe. Daniel shook his head. You keep saying that. But I don't even know what bonding means for you. She leaned in closer, her voice low and steady. Bond is life. Without it, cold takes you. Or they take you. Her words sent a chill through him. It was like she was speaking about fate, not just survival. The glow from her skin brightened again. Daniel felt the warmth spreading deeper into him, making it is easier to ignore the freezing air. But it wasn't just heat. Something about it made his heart beat slow, his muscles relax. He had to force himself to stay alert. What happens if we finish this bond? He asked, her silver blue eyes locked on his. Then you are mine, and I am yours. Until death, Daniel looked away, unsure if he was ready for that kind of promise. But before he could speak, sound cut through the storm, faint but sharp, like something slicing through snow. The girl stiffened. They come closer. Daniel grabbed his blaster, his body tense. The shadows outside the tent grew darker. Shapes moving in the swirling white. It was impossible to tell how many. She leaned toward him, her lips almost brushing his ear. If they see you not bonded, they kill you first. Daniel felt the weight of the choice pressing down on him. Bond with her, whatever that truly meant, or face the storm and her hunters alone. The tent suddenly dipped inward as something heavy pressed against it. A deep growl echoed from outside, low and inhuman. Daniel's hand tightened on his weapon, but the girl whispered, no. Fighting makes it worse. They must see the glow, feel the bond. He didn't know if he could trust her, but he also knew that without her, he wouldn't last long out here. The wind roared, snow whirled through a tiny opening at the flap. And Daniel saw it, a tall, shadowy figure, barely visible through the storm. Standing still, watching another appeared beside it. Then another. They didn't move closer. But he could feel their eyes on the tent. The girl's marks flared. Suddenly, the light spilling out through the thin fabric, Daniel noticed the figures shift. As if reacting to it, she pressed her forehead to his chest, whispering words in her own language, soft and rhythmic. Daniel didn't understand them, but the sound seemed to carry weight, almost like a prayer. The warmth between them grew, the glow brighter still. Outside, the figures didn't come closer, but they didn't leave either. They wait. To see if Bond is real, she murmured. Daniel swallowed hard. Every part of him screamed to demand answers, but there was no time for questions. The storm was closing around them like a cage, and the hunters were already here. If she was telling the truth, then his only chance of surviving the night was to let this strange ritual happen. He looked down at her, her eyes full of urgency, but also trust. And in that moment, he realized she was as trapped as he was. The tent rattled again, and the growl. Outside came once more. Louder this time, the girl took his hands, pressing them to the brightest marks on her skin. Her voice trembled, but stayed firm. "We finish now. Or both end here." Daniel's hands were still pressed against the glowing patterns on her skin. The heat from her body wasn't just warmth anymore. It felt alive, pulsing in time with her heartbeat. Outside, the shadows stayed in place, watching, waiting. The storm roared around them. But he could still sense the silent focus of those figures. They weren't rushing in. They weren't attacking. They were letting the cold and fear do their work. He lowered his voice. "Tell me everything. I need to know what I'm up." Against the alien girl's eyes shifted away for a moment. As if she didn't want to speak, finally, she said, "I was promised to an elder." "Before I was born," Daniel frowned. "Promised." She nodded slowly. "In my people's law, some are chosen to keep the blood strong. Power stays in the elder's line." Daniel felt a knot forming in his stomach, "And you ran away from it." "Ah," he asked. Her voice was quiet, but firm. "Yes. I would rather freeze in the storm than be his." Her hands trembled slightly as she held his, but she didn't let go. "I saw you before. In the market near the landing port," she continued. "I felt something, a heat that was not from the sun." Daniel tried to process her words. "So you followed me here?" She gave a small nod. "I knew you were far from your people. Alone, safer to choose you than be found by him." Daniel shook his head in disbelief. "And these hunters?" Her jaw tightened. "His loyal ones. They will take me back and kill you to erase the shame." The wind slammed against the tent, making the fabric ripple violently. For a moment, Daniel thought the hunters might come in right then, but they didn't. They stayed just beyond the thin wall, their presence heavy. "They are waiting for me to be weak," she whispered. "If I fall, they carry me back. No fight, no chase. And you, they leave for the storm." Daniel glanced at his blaster lying within reach. He thought about making a run for it, but the idea died in his mind as soon as it formed. They were faster, better suited to the cold, and probably armed. He wasn't even sure how many there were. One thing was certain, he wouldn't make it far. He looked at her again. "You keep saying the bond will protect me. Why?" She hesitated before answering. "Because in our law, no one can harm the bonded pair. Not even an elder. It is sacred." Daniel understood now why she was so desperate to finish it. If the hunters believed it was real, they would have to leave them both alone, but that also meant tying himself to her for life. In a way he didn't understand, the glow from her skin flickered for a moment. She winced, pulling her arms closer to her body. Daniel frowned. "Are you getting Weaker. She nodded once. The bond is half made. Without the rest, it fades. And I will fade with it. Her voice carried a kind of certainty that made Daniel's chest tighten. The growl outside came again. Closer now. Snowflakes pushed through the tent's seams. Landing on the heater and melting instantly, Daniel could feel the cold creeping back in. The girl's eyes locked on his, urgent and pleading. "Help me finish." "Please," she said, her voice almost breaking. Daniel's mind was spinning. She was asking him to take a step that would change everything. He didn't even know her name, but he could feel the weight of her trust, the risks she had taken. Just to reach him, he thought of the hunters outside, their patience, their quiet confidence that the storm would win. And he realized he couldn't just let her be dragged back into something she had fought so hard to escape. "What do I have to do?" he asked. A flicker of relief crossed her face. She moved closer, placing his hands over her heart. Her skin was warm now, the glow steady again, in my people's way. "The bond is made with touch and promise," she explained. "You must speak the words, even if you do not believe them. The law will." The wind outside roared like it was angry. Daniel could see the shadows shifting. Restless now, she began to say the words slowly, guiding him through them, her voice low and melodic. He repeated them, each syllable strange on his tongue as he spoke. The glow around her marks grew brighter, spilling through the tent like soft firelight outside. The movement stopped. The growls faded. Replaced by silence, Daniel realized the hunters were listening when the last word left his mouth. The girl took a slow, deep breath, and the glow pulsed one final time. She leaned her forehead against his and whispered, "It is done. They cannot touch us now." Daniel let out a long breath, his heart still racing. But then a thought struck him. If they can't touch us, does that mean they'll leave? The girl's eyes darkened. Yes. But the elder will not stop. He will send others. Stronger ones. Daniel's relief faded. The bond might have saved them tonight, but it had also painted a target on his back. Outside, the shadows began to move away, fading into the storm. The girl's voice was calm, but heavy. They will not be the last. The hunters were gone, swallowed by the white storm. But Daniel didn't feel safe. The cold still pressed against the tent walls. And the girl's warning echoed in his mind. They will send others. Stronger ones. She sat quietly beside him, her glowing marks dimming now that the bond was complete. Her breathing had steadied, but her eyes stayed sharp. Watching the tent flap like she expected it to move again, Daniel broke the silence. "If they're gone, we should pack and head for my base." Her head shook slowly. "No. They will wait on the paths." "Ambush?" Daniel frowned. "So what? We just sit here until the storm ends." Her gaze met his, calm but firm. "If we leave now, we die before sunrise." He didn't like it, but part of him knew she was right. These hunters weren't random attackers. They were trained, patient, and used to this frozen wilderness. He glanced at the heater, its power cells slowly ticking down. They couldn't stay in one place forever. She noticed his look and spoke softly, "We have one way. But it is dangerous." Daniel leaned forward. "Go on." Her voice dropped lower. "There is an old shelter, hidden in the ice cliffs. My mother's people used it when they were hunted." Daniel raised a brow. "How far?" Her eyes flickered with thought. "A day's walk." "If we move without rest," Daniel almost laughed. "A day in this storm. Without getting spotted. That's suicide." She didn't flinch. "Not suicide. Gamble." He stared at her, trying to read her expression. She was serious, dead serious. "What's so special about this shelter?" he asked. Her tone grew heavy. "It cannot be found by hunters. The walls block their senses. The cold inside hides life heat. Daniel thought about it. If she was telling the truth, it might be their best chance, but the risk was huge. If they were seen, they wouldn't make it halfway. Still, sitting in a slowly cooling tent waiting to be surrounded again wasn't much of a plan either. She must have read his hesitation because she moved closer and said, "The bond will help us. They will feel it from far. Think we hide in the village. They will search wrong places." Daniel rubbed his face, the weight of the choice pressing on him. One wrong move and they'd both end up frozen in the snow. But her eyes, even tired and shadowed, carried something stubborn, a refusal to give in, and he found himself matching that stubbornness. "All right," he said at last. "We go at first light." Her lips curved into the faintest smile. First light is worst for hunters. Their eyes need dark. Storm hides us better. Daniel frowned. "Then we go before dawn." She nodded, "Yes. And we must travel without heater. Cold will cover our trail." Daniel's gut twisted at the thought. The heater was the only thing keeping the tent livable. Walking into the storm without it felt like walking into an open grave. But the way she said it, there was no other choice. She began gathering the few dry cloths from the tent, tearing some into strips. Daniel watched. "What are you doing?" Her hands moved quickly, binding hands and feet, to keep blood warm. Also hide skin from wind. He realized she was preparing for both of them. In a strange way, the simple, quiet focus in her movements made him trust her more than any promise. When she finished, she looked at him and said, "You must stay close. If you fall behind, the cold will take you before I can find you." He nodded. "And if you fall behind?" She met his gaze, unblinking. "Then you must carry me." Bond means neither leaves the other. The storm outside groaned against the tent. Daniel knew he wouldn't sleep much tonight. The weight of what was coming kept his mind sharp. He checked his blaster again, slid spare energy cells into his jacket, and packed what little food they had. The girl tied the last of the cloth, strips around her arms, and sat across from him, the soft glow from her skin reflecting in her eyes. "Why are you helping me?" she asked suddenly. Daniel blinked. "What do you mean? You could leave me?" "And maybe they would not follow you," she said, her tone quiet but curious. Daniel thought about it, then shook his head. "That's not how I work." For a moment, she just looked at him, then gave a small nod, as if she understood something important. Hours passed, the storm never slowing. When the dim light of pre-dawn began to filter through the tent walls, she stood. "It is time," she said simply. Daniel rose, pulling on his gloves and tightening the straps on his pack. The cold outside would be brutal, but staying here would be worse. They unzipped the tent flap, and the storm's icy breath hit them like a wall. Snow whipped in every direction. The sky a swirling mass of white and gray. Daniel stepped out first, the girl close behind, their figures almost lost in the blizzard. The wind howled around them, but together they began their silent march toward the ice cliffs, toward the only hope they had left. The cold outside was worse than Daniel imagined. It felt like knives cutting through his clothes, slicing into his skin. Every breath burned in his chest, and snow stung his eyes. The girl walked close beside him, her smaller frame almost hidden in the storm. He could see the faint glow of her skin even through the white haze, a dim light that seemed to fight the darkness. The wind howled so loud they couldn't speak. Their boots sank deep into the snow with every step, making progress slow. Daniel's muscles ached, his fingers numb despite the gloves. But then he noticed something strange. The closer she stayed to him, the less the cold bit into his bones. It wasn't the heater they had left that behind. It was her. Her warmth seemed to reach into him, steady and alive after an hour of trudging through the storm. Daniel's breathing was ragged. She reached for his hand without warning. Slipping her small fingers into his glove, Instantly, the heat spread stronger. Her glowing marks flared faintly, as if feeding off the contact. He gave her a quick glance, but her face was focused ahead. Eyes scanning the snow, the bond, he thought. He didn't understand it fully, but something about their connection was keeping him alive out here. It wasn't just heat, he felt his heartbeat matching hers. His pace adjusting to her steps. Even the ache in his legs eased when she stayed close. It was as if their bodies were sharing strength. They moved in silence, only the crunch of snow underfoot breaking the sound of the wind. After what felt like hours, she suddenly stopped. Daniel nearly walked into her. She raised her head slightly, as if listening to something far away. "What is it?" he asked, his voice barely carrying over the storm. "They follow," she replied simply. Daniel's gut tightened. "They're behind us." "How far?" She shook her head. "Far. But not far enough." Her eyes narrowed. "They know the cliffs. Too, but they will not reach before us if we keep moving." They pushed on, Daniel's legs burning now. The snow grew deeper, forcing them to lift their feet high with every step. Several times he stumbled, but each time she grabbed his arm and steadied him. Her grip was stronger than he expected for someone so small when they paused for a moment behind a mound of ice. To catch their breath, Daniel studied her in the pale glow of her markings. "You're not freezing," he said. Realizing she didn't shiver the way he did, she tilted her head. "Bond shares my heat with you, and your strength with me." Daniel frowned. "My strength?" She nodded. "Humans, strong in ways we are not. I feel it in my blood now." He didn't know whether to be reassured or alarmed. The idea that something inside him was now part of her, and vice versa, was unsettling. But he couldn't deny it was keeping them alive. They moved again. The wind now shifting to their backs, pushing them forward, it made the march slightly easier. Though the cold never relented. Then, through the swirling snow, Daniel saw a shadowy rise, a jagged shape breaking the endless white. The cliffs. He asked. She gave a small nod. "Yes. But we must be careful. Hunters may watch from above." As they drew closer, the cliff face became clearer. Sharp walls of ice with narrow ledges winding upward. She led him toward a narrow crack, barely wide enough for them to slip through. Inside, the wind died, almost instantly replaced by an eerie stillness. The air was still freezing. But without the storm's bite, Daniel could breathe more easily. They walked deeper. Okay? The path twisting through natural ice tunnels that glowed faintly blue from the light filtering through above. The girl finally slowed, turning to face him. "Here is safe," she said, her voice quiet but certain. Daniel glanced around. Safe from the cold. Her eyes locked on his. Safe from them. For now, he dropped his pack and sank down onto the frozen ground. Exhausted, the girl knelt beside him, taking his hands again. Her skin was warm. The glow from her markings steady. "You did well," she said softly. Daniel managed to faint. "Smile. I'm still alive." "So I guess I did." But the relief didn't last long. Her expression grew serious again. "The bond." "It is not complete," Daniel groaned. "I thought we already finished it back in the tent." She shook her head. "That was the promise. Now we must seal it. Or it will fade." He stared at her. "And what happens if it fades?" Answer came without hesitation. "Then they can kill you." Daniel's chest tightened. The hunters were already chasing them, if what she said was true. The only thing stopping them was this bond, a ritual he didn't understand and wasn't sure he wanted. But as he looked at her, exhausted and determined, he realized the choice wasn't really his anymore. They were bound together by survival. And that meant seeing it through. Outside, far away, the wind roared again. Somewhere in the storm, the hunters were still moving. The silence inside the ice tunnel was strange after so many hours of wind and snow. Daniel could hear only the sound of his own breathing. and the faint hum from the girl's glowing markings. She sat across from him, her silver blue eyes steady. "And unblinking, the hunters will not cross this place for now," she said. "But the bond must be sealed before the sun returns." Daniel rubbed his hands together. Trying to work warmth into his fingers, he still didn't fully understand. What sealing the bond meant. "What do I have to do?" he asked cautiously, her head tilted slightly. "You give me your life." "And I give you mine?" Daniel blinked. "That sounds permanent." Her voice was calm. "It is. There is no breaking after this." He stared at her for a long moment. Part of him wanted to argue, to say they could find another way. But another part, the part that had seen the hunter's shadows and felt their cold patience, knew she wasn't lying. If the bond faded, his protection would vanish, and she would be dragged back to the elder she feared. She moved closer. Her glow brighter now in the dim tunnel. "Place your hands here," she said. Guiding them to the center of her chest, just above her heartbeat, the warmth was immediate, almost soothing. Then she placed her own hands over his heart. Her touch light but firm. "In my people's law," she began. Her voice low and rhythmic. "We speak the vow in breath. So our life joins in the air we share." Daniel felt his pulse quicken. She leaned close enough that their foreheads touched. Her breath mixed with his as she spoke strange, flowing words in her language. When she stopped, she looked into his eyes. "Now you speak." "Say what I say." The words were alien on his tongue, but he repeated them carefully. Each sound seemed to echo softly in the ice walls. With every word, the glow from her markings grew stronger, wrapping them both in a pale, steady light. Daniel felt heat building inside him, a warmth that didn't come from any heater or blanket. It was deep, alive, spreading to every part of his body. When the last word left his lips, the light around them pulsed once bright enough to make him blink, then settled into a steady glow. The girl closed her eyes, breathing slowly. "It is done," she whispered. Daniel let out a long breath, not realizing until then that he had been holding it. "So, that's it?" he asked. She opened her eyes and gave a faint smile. "From this day, your life is mine to guard. And my life is yours." Daniel wasn't sure what that meant for tomorrow, or the next week, or the years ahead, but as strange as it felt, he also knew they had just passed a point where there was no turning back. The tunnel seemed warmer now, though the cold air still hung around them. Daniel could feel the bond in a way he couldn't explain, a sense of her presence in the back of his mind, steady and certain. He shifted his pack and said, "When the storm ends, we'll move." She nodded, "Yes." "But we go away from your base," he frowned. "Why?" "Because the elder's reach is long. Your people may give you up to him if it keeps them safe," she said without hesitation. That thought made Daniel's chest tighten. He had always believed in the agency's loyalty, but now he wasn't so sure. "Then where do we go?" he asked. Her eyes softened. "Far. To the warm lands, where snow never falls." Before Daniel could answer, a faint sound reached them. It was distant, muffled by the ice, but unmistakable, a deep, steady vibration. The girl's expression darkened instantly. "They are coming faster than I thought," she said, standing quickly. Daniel grabbed his pack, his muscles tensing. "The hunters," shook her head slowly, her voice dropping. "No, not my people. Worse." Daniel's mind raced. If something was worse than the hunters, he didn't want to meet it in a narrow tunnel of ice. "What do we do?" he asked. She glanced toward the deeper part of the cave, her voice steady. "We go deeper, to the old ways. Before my people lived in the cold." He didn't like the sound of that, but the urgency in her tone left no room for argument. They moved quickly, their footsteps echoing on the frozen ground as they went deeper. The walls began to change from smooth blue ice to jagged stone, Daniel felt the air shift, warmer and heavier, carrying a faint smell of something ancient. Finally, she stopped and turned to him. Her voice was almost a whisper from here. "Nothing will be the same." Daniel stared at her, the glow from her markings casting strange shadows on the walls. He thought about the moment she had stepped into his tent, shivering and desperate. He had thought she only wanted warmth. Now he realized she had brought him into something far bigger, far older than he could have imagined. Somewhere behind them, the distant vibration grew louder. Ahead, the darkness of the tunnel waited. Daniel tightened his grip on his pack and stepped forward. Whatever was coming, they would face it together, bonded by life, bound by fate. And as they disappeared into the shadows, her last words echoed in his mind. "They will never let us go, and neither will I."